Hey, what's up, Dev Crew? Today I'm with Alain Chautard, and he is a Google developer expert in web technologies and Angular. His daily mission is to help development teams get started and become fluent with Angular. He provides consulting, coaching, and on-site training to clients all around the world. In fact, he actually came and trained my team here in the Dallas Fort Worth area. He's an organizer of the Google Developer Group Chapter in Sacramento, California, an international conference speaker, and published author of several video courses. Thank you so much for coming on, Alain.
Well, thanks a lot for having me. My pleasure.
This is awesome. So I mentioned before we met when you came to train us, and it was really interesting because you brought your own training material, and you mentioned how I've trained several people in very basic things like JavaScript and stuff like that. But I thought it was interesting how you've created your own material, and that's kind of what I was like. This is a good person to know. So, can you tell us a little bit about your programming journey? How and when did you get started coding?
So I started coding a long time ago when I was in high school. So I grew up in France, and it's important to mention because computer science in general is not that big in France, I would say. And we don't really do that in high school usually. So the way I got into it was almost by accident. I had one of these calculators, Texas Instruments, a TI-80 calculator, and you can code with them. So you can write some basic programs. And I got into it like this. I started, basic stuff, and I was like, wow, I can give instructions to that machine, and it works. It does what I want. So I started coding a few more complex things, and I was hooked. I just really liked it. And 1 year later, so graduated from high school, got to college, and that's when I realized that coding for computers is just the same thing. And that blew my mind. So I got into different programming languages, and I was hooked. And basically, academically speaking, I would succeed in anything related to coding so easily. I just loved it. So I did all of my college, graduated with a master's degree in computer science, and then started being a developer right away. So all of my career has been around coding, and yeah, I was hooked from the start pretty much.
I love the story that you got started with the TI calculators. That's
yeah,
awesome.
Yeah.
So did you make any games on there, or was it just purely like what did you code?
Sort of. I had sort of a basic game where you would kind of kick a ball and you would see the ball going in the sky and then falling down. So, just using a simple equation to draw an arc with that ball going up and down. So it was pretty basic, but still, I mean, starting from nothing, it was super impressive for me.
Right.
So it was sort of a game.
So it was like you just saw how far it would go or whatever.
Exactly. You could adjust like the speed and the angle you wanted to kick the ball, and you could see. Yeah, you would basically draw what would happen, and yeah, it was fun enough to get started.
So like the beginnings of a game, basically.
That's exactly. Cool. Yeah.
That's awesome. So you do a lot of different things. So I remember going out before, because I know when we first met, I looked on your site. I was like, oh, you do photography too, and I think you mentioned it. I was like, wait, you do like stock photography and stuff. So you do some like professional level work. And so you do like photography, you have a wife and children, you do this international speaking. You told me that you went to Bolivia to speak recently and to London as well. You do training all over the United States. Do you train internationally as well?
I do from time to time. Yeah, I've been to India in 2018. And South Africa in 2017, I think. So yeah, I do get to travel far away as well.
And on top of that, you're doing consulting with about half of your time. How can you fit all this together? This is a lot to like. This is a lot of stuff. Like how are you able to do all these different things?
So the main trick behind all of this is that I'm self-employed. And because I'm self-employed, most of the time I work from home. I have zero commute. This saves a lot of time because my commute is 5 seconds. I mean, from the kitchen to my office is a 5-second walk. So when you free all of that time, it gives you abilities to do pretty much anything you want. I don't have to go to an office, so I work on the stuff that I want to. Usually, I'm also picky with my clients. So if my clients are not as flexible as I want them to be, then I just don't work with them. Which means that most of my consulting is done remotely from home.
I just think that's funny because I think if any of us has done freelancing before, we wish we had that ability to turn down clients.
Yeah, I know. So, well, the thing is, it doesn't happen overnight, right? When I got started, that was the exception rather than the rule. But as you do it for a few years, you have more experience, you build your profile, you get into, well, the sort of stuff that I do, like speaking at conferences and publishing video courses. And once you have all of that in your profile, basically, people trust you easily, and it kind of changes the roles around the table a little bit, meaning that when I talk to clients, most of the time, it's not like a job interview. It's more like they're trying to convince me that they are worthy enough for me to work with them,
right.
which is funny. I'm happy to work with them.
Well, it's really funny because I read this book a while ago, and I think it seems like you're that, like being a Google developer expert that's a rare thing to have, right? And you're recognized as an expert in Angular and web technologies. So it's like I could see there's this book called So Good They Can't Ignore You. And it reminds me of that. Like, you've gotten to this place where you've been successful enough, and it's you kind of turn the job on its head where you have the power, for lack of a better term, and you can say, look, I want to work with you, because you're a very approachable person. You're not proud at all. I noticed I asked you so many questions during our training. I think I asked you like 200 questions. And you were very open about the stuff that you didn't know, and you knew so much that I was like, wow, you really know your stuff. Like, it was really impressive. Not that I know a lot about Angular, but I could just tell that you did from the questions that I asked. So how did you get started on this journey of doing freelancing and then work your way up? Because I think a lot of us are interested either in doing I'm interested in having side work, and I think a lot of us are interested in being our own bosses. Can you tell us about that process and that journey?
Yeah, so that's something I started about 8-9 years ago, I think. And the way I started freelancing was online. So I created accounts on several platforms like Fiverr, Upwork. Well, back then it was Odesk and Elance, the two big ones, really. So I would just create my profile there and start pitching what I was doing. And I got a few clients, and that made things click for me, because it was the first time in my life that I was able to make some income outside of a regular job. And it makes a huge difference, because in terms of mindset, you're like, oh, wow, people can actually pay me outside of my regular job to do these things. And what if I got more clients like this? And, the way these platforms work is that when you do well, people leave positive feedback. And when you get feedback, well, more clients come to you and they trust you more easily. And then it's a snowball effect, and you get more and more clients, and it grows and grows and grows. And that's basically how I got started. So yeah, from there, it basically grew into getting clients in what I would call real life, meaning outside of online, getting contracts with, companies, going to their office, working with them, and all of that. And yeah, I ended up quitting my job and doing this full time. Probably took 2 to 3 years to get to the full-time point. So, I did it nice and slow, wanted to make it 100% safe. and make sure that I was able to cover all of my bases, that I would have enough income to go solo full time.
That's awesome. So I want to kind of unpack something in particular, because I've heard of other people that recommend going to these platforms, but it feels to me today like these platforms are very saturated. It's hard to break in.
Yes.
Is that the case? Where should people start if they wanted to start today? Could you give us a taste of, a recommendation of how to even get started with this?
Yeah, definitely. So the key to be successful on these platforms is to do what nobody else does. And that's counterintuitive, because most people, especially developers, we want to be full stack. We want to say, I know this, I know that, I know all of these languages, I know all of these technologies. Thing is, if you do that, you're just one amongst millions, maybe not millions, but let's say thousands of developers with very similar profiles. When I started doing these online gigs, my angle was that I was working only with Google Maps. So I was building small, things based on Google Maps. So I was working with real estate agents who just wanted to have a map on their website showing the properties that they have for sale. I would work with travel companies that wanted to showcase a few locations where they have travel deals or that kind of thing. So it was very basic, very easy work from a developer perspective, meaning in terms of code, it was 50 lines of code for each project, basically. And it's super counterintuitive, because most developers would think, why would someone pay me to do such simple work? The thing is, simple doesn't matter. People want results. They want a map. There's nobody out there that says, I create maps for you. So I did that. I said, I'm going to create maps for you. And I did a lot. And of course, the good thing with that kind of work too is that it's very visual, meaning a map, you can take a screenshot of it and you can show it, you can make it look good. You can add, fancy icons and overlays and everything. And it's very powerful in terms of visualization. So I was able to build a portfolio pretty quickly of 10, 20 different projects that really looked great. And that helped pretty much trigger everything else, because once you have that portfolio and you're focused on a very specific technology, you have zero competition. If people were looking for someone who does Google Maps, they would find me. And that's how I got a lot of clients. And I would just, my profile was visible through all of the noise of all of the other developers because of that. So find a niche within something that you know and use it. That's really the key idea.
I really like that idea too, because you can, you don't have to go learn a new API every time you go out and do something. You just go, oh, I've mastered Google Maps, and like I can knock this stuff out. That's awesome. I love that idea. So I know that you're training people how to either become part-time or full-time freelancers, and it seems like you really know what you're talking about. Can you tell us a little bit about your program and how you train people to do that?
Yeah. So because of the way I started all by myself on the side, using these platforms and then building it to a point where it was my main source of income, leaving my job, and now growing it to a place where I would never thought I would get, basically. Many people ask me, how did you do it? So last year I thought, well, why not teach people how to do that? Why not help them get started, create a business, get out there and try to get clients.
Yeah.
So I created a program. It's online. It's something people would register to, and then they follow basic instructions. So every week you have exercise to work on, basically to kind of get out of your comfort zone a little bit and start putting a new profile out there and advertise what you know how to do and figure out which ideas could work. So figure out which niche you could get into to get some traction and find your first clients. So that's part of the program. The second important part of the program is that every single person who goes through it we have coaching calls every week, so one-on-one with me, and we just discuss progress, next steps, to-do list, all of that, to make sure that everybody stays on track and make some good progress along the way. So it's a mix of you're online, you go on a website, you learn about, you read materials, and then you work on exercises to build the business. And then every week, coaching calls with me to stay on track and ask questions and all of that.
Awesome. So how, if people are interested, how can they find out more about that?
So I do have a website which is called Consultant Factory. You can, we can probably I'll give you the URL and you can put it.
Yeah, I'll put it in the description. Yeah, I'll put it in the description. Awesome.
Sounds good.
So that's really cool. So let's talk about becoming a Google developer expert. This is something I think a lot of people are interested in. I don't know if you saw, I interviewed Santosh Yadav. I think you know him or you know of him. How did you become a Google developer expert? What was your journey doing that?
So becoming a Google developer expert is something I thought was impossible. If you asked me 3-4 years ago, I would have told you that's too much. It's just too difficult. And then, so I'm a Google developer group organizer as well. And so these two things, Google developer groups and Google developer experts, are two different programs from Google. So the groups are basically meetups that people organize and to talk every month about Google technologies. And getting into the Google developer group program, I would talk to more GDEs, and I would get presentations from GDEs as well. And in that process, I learned that the best way to become a GDE is to be a GDE. What do I mean by that? What I mean by that is that the GDE program has very simple rules on what a GDE is. A GDE is a person who is an advocate, basically, about a technology from Google. So there's Angular, there's Google Maps, there's Firebase, there's all of the different things that Google does. If you're good in one of these domains and you blog about it, or you talk about it, or you help people on Stack Overflow about it, or you have an open source library written with that, any of these things basically make you a possible candidate to become a GDE. Now, if you do all of it, it's even better, of course. But the idea really, if you want to be a GDE, is to do all of that work. So all of these open source, not necessarily open source, but open source is one aspect of it. But, writing, speaking, contributing, helping others in those domains. If you do that a lot and keep track of all of the talks, all of the things that you do, then at some point you can apply to the program and say, well, see, Google, I do all of these things. I think I'm a GDE. and then you have to go through a bunch of interviews with other GDEs and then with people at Google in the category that you're applying to. And if you're a good fit, then you do become a GDE. But really the thing is, once you are a GDE, you just keep doing what you did before. So you keep blogging, you keep talking, you keep doing all of these activities. And that's why really, if you want to become a GDE, well, the best way to do it is to start being a GDE now. So doing all of the work of, talking about it, publishing stuff, helping people, but that's the idea.
I love it. I love it. So I think we could go off into a long thing about how do you get into speaking and all this other stuff. But let's start off. You started. What's the first thing that you did? Let's just go with that, because I know we could go down a bunch of rabbit holes. What's the first thing that you did that helped you on this path?
So it's actually a very good question, because it's going to kind of tie everything together a little bit. So I started being self-employed years ago, and I did that while I was still in France. But in 2014, I decided that I would move to California. So I created my own business in California, moved here, and the thing is, I didn't know anyone in California. I had zero clients, nobody. It's like, brand new life from scratch. I had a few clients online for my business. That's what sustained it for a few months. But quickly I realized if I want to succeed here, I have to find more clients and I have to be known locally here in Sacramento. So I started going to meetups. And one of the first meetup I went to was the Google Developer Group Sacramento, that 6 years later, I'm now the organizer of it. Which is a fun story as well. But so I started going to meetups and I saw that this was a great opportunity because, recruiters go to meetups and they pitch open jobs and it's a great way to network and all of that. And what I learned very quickly by going to these meetups 6 years ago is that Angular was very hot. And all of the Google Maps projects I talked about earlier, well, the thing is, every time I had bigger applications to build, I would use Angular to do it. So not only did I build all of that stuff with Google Maps, it was actually a lot of AngularJS and JavaScript on top of it. So I realized that my resume had 20 plus different projects built with AngularJS. And it was just 2014, and Angular was like 2 or 3 years old, which means that on the market, nobody could claim I have 20 Angular projects under my belt. So I thought, okay, that's interesting. Recruiters, basically, they saw my resume and they would go crazy, like, wow, that's not even possible. So I had to prove that I did all of that stuff. But I thought, okay, that's a huge opportunity here. My profile is unique because of what I've done before. And meetup seems to be a very good idea. So I looked for an Angular meetup in Sacramento and there was none. So I said, okay, that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to create a Sacramento Angular meetup. And I'm going to be the organizer and I'm going to be doing the talks. And that's what I did. So that's how I got into public speaking. That's how I basically got into the tech scene in Sacramento, made a name for myself. And it's basically started everything else. So getting clients, getting in to become a GDE years later, getting into training as well. It all started from here. So the decision to say, okay, I'm going to create that meetup and just go and talk about Angular every month.
That's awesome. I totally agree. Like I talk to, I coach and mentor a lot of people and they're like, I applied to jobs over and over again and I just don't get anywhere. I'm like, go to a meetup, go and teach something. It doesn't matter if you're an expert in it. Just go learn and go teach and say, look, I'm learning this stuff, but here's what I've learned, right? You don't have to be an expert to even get started. So I really like that. I love that message because I totally agree with it. So you also create your own course material. How did you get started? So you've done video courses, right? So I love video. I have a YouTube channel, obviously. And why did you pursue video courses over doing something like a book?
So if I had the choice, I would go with a book. and there's two reasons for that. Video editing is complex and is very time consuming. And the second thing is I don't like my accent.
I think it's awesome.
So I would rather write than speak, but that's basically because of all of the talks I would do at my meetup. An editor contacted me to do video courses, and that's how I got into doing video rather than doing a book. It's basically because I did a lot of public speaking, but it's almost a coincidence. It's not by design.
So it's kind of like if you just, it seems like you just start doing something and that will lead to opportunities. So if you realize what opportunities you want, you have to see what other people are doing. Like for example, you're a great example here. If you start the work beforehand and fake it till you make it, right? Basically, like just do the work, the opportunities will come. That's what I'm hearing from your story.
Yeah, that's part of it. And the other important part in that I've seen people try to replicate that sort of success, but the thing is they give up too quickly. Meaning, if you create a meetup and do 2 talks, like month 1, I do 1 talk, month 2, I do 1 talk, and month 3, you're like, okay, I didn't get anything out of it, I give up. No, that's not how it works. I got this video course opportunity after doing 2 years of meetup. So that's at least 24 different talks that I did all by myself. So, doing the prep work and delivering the talk and working on the code example. I don't know how many hours went into it, but it's a lot. So yeah, if the idea is, if you do the work of focusing on one thing, trying to do your best, learning it, working on it, making your work public, and just keep doing it day in, day out, and trust the process, that has to pay off, of course, at some point.
Yeah, I like, for example, just to relate to that, like I started doing YouTube. I'm like, my YouTube's going to take off. And I was like, if I would have stuck with my YouTube's going to take off, like I only have 200 subscribers right now, right? I don't know why you came on. I don't get a lot of views, but but it's still fun to affect just 1 or 2 people and go, that a few people watch it and it affects their lives. So that's really good. But I even said, I'm going to do this for 3 years and then reassess.
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
You have to do a large time span and put in the time.
Yeah. And I think 3 years is perfect. I mean, things have to happen within 3 years. That's for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of got that from. You ever watch Shark Tank at all?
Nope.
Well, one of this guy named Kevin on Shark Tank, everyone doesn't like him, but he says, if you can't make money after 3 years, it's just a hobby. So I think that's a good.
That sounds realistic. Yeah.
So I was going to ask you how you became enough of an expert to start doing these video courses, but it sounds like it was a process that unfolded before you, right? You kind of painted that picture for us. Was there anything else? Can you break down the process of how were you, I guess, motivated to go and do these talks each week? Because, it's easy to say, oh, I'm not going to give up, but it still takes a lot of motivation just to get the work done. Mm-hmm. So how did you do that and prepare yourself and become the expert in Angular?
Mm-hmm. So I think one of the things that helped me a lot is that when I started with that, Angular was really super, super popular. And there was so much demand for it that as soon as I created my meetup, sponsors came to me. I didn't have to look for anything. The sponsors would come and say, "Oh, we're looking to hire 10 Angular developers. Can we do your meetup in our office?" So I would get cool office spaces to do the meetups, and other companies would sponsor the food and the drinks and same things. They were all looking for help, and that made things so much easier, because once you have that momentum, you see there's a lot of demand. You see people coming to the meetup. Every time I had at least 20 plus people coming, and every month they would come back and ask for more. So once you get into that, it's difficult to give up, because you know that people are now counting on you and they expect you to do this thing. So that helps a lot to get the momentum and keep going. That said, that's what helped me with public speaking. If I talk about blogging, for instance, it took me a lot more time to get traction, because, SEO. Yeah. SEO, it's not an overnight kind of thing. It takes months before your content gets shared and becomes popular and all of that. So blogging is tricky. You don't get the same feedback. It's different. So this one, I really had to get the discipline to just say, stick to it, keep posting, it's going to work. And yeah, there's no secret recipe. It's really, I want to do this for a while. I would say at least 1 year, stick to it for at least 1 year, see how it goes, and then reassess. 3 years is even better, as you mentioned, but But it's difficult to stay motivated if nothing happens within that time frame. That's for sure.
Yeah, but definitely don't say I'm going to try to become the Google developer expert, in 2 months,
Oh,
basically.
it's not possible anyways, because they want to see so much stuff that you cannot build all of that in 2 months. It would take a minimum of probably 2 years of content put out there before you could apply to it, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah. The other guy I interviewed, he happened to do it very quickly, but things just aligned for him where it just happened. But you're saying probably the more likely it's going to take 2 to 3 years to do that. Yeah. So we've talked about a lot of different fun stuff. So we've talked about how you've done course material, have you been a Google developer expert? So I asked people recently on LinkedIn, I was like, what do you want me to ask people? And I think it's interesting to learn from people's failures or setbacks. So what's a setback that you had that you wouldn't mind sharing with us that you learned from during this process?
There's been so many. The thing is, I always try to work on some new ideas and new stuff. So much so that I don't worry too much about failure in the end, because let's say I'm going to start 5 different initiatives at any given time. If 4 of them fail, well, one of them is going to be successful, and that's all that matters. So because of that, I don't worry about failure too much. But if I look at my past, I've probably had, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 different blogs, and only a couple survived all of that.
That's awesome.
Because it's just so difficult to get started into something new and keep doing it and get the traction and the passion for it. One meaningful failure. Let's see. In the past, well, last year, for instance, so I became a GD a couple of years ago, and I applied to speak at NGConf just a couple of months later. And the funny thing is I got selected for it. So NGConf is the biggest Angular conference in the world. It was my first time applying to speak at it, and I got selected, which was, wow, okay, I got selected. And retrospectively, this was too early of a success, I would say, meaning that the next year I thought, well, I'm just going to apply and I'm going to send a few ideas. And well, I was selected last year, so I'm going to be selected this year, possibly, right? But I failed. And I was not selected on year 2. And this year I applied same way, and I was not selected either. So that's 2 failures. And in that case, I think I failed because my initial attempt was a success. In a sense that when you succeed, you don't really learn from it because you just tried something and it worked. So, okay, I was successful, but you don't really know why. And then that doesn't set you up for success necessarily later on, which is why I think it's actually better to fail first, because then you can assess and see, okay, what did I possibly do wrong? What could I try to do any different next time to make things successful? So failure is a good thing. It's something that is never good. When you get a failure, when I get rejected from NGConf, I hate it. But the thing is, after a few days, it's like, okay, why did it happen? Was I too confident? What about these talk ideas? Were they good enough? Maybe not. What could I do better next time? And that's really the process. Use failure as a way to reassess, question what you did, and see how you can do better. And it almost sounds cliche, but that's really the thing. If you do that, then the next time you're stronger, you're better equipped, and things are going to go better. That's for sure.
So use failure as a feedback mechanism versus something that you're mad at, or of course you're going to be disappointed, but it seems like a lot of times for myself, I get like upset or frustrated instead of channeling that energy into how can I pivot to something else. In fact, I was thinking of, have you ever seen that comic where the guy he's picking like in a tunnel and he's about to get to gold and he quits too early? Have you ever seen something like that before?
Yeah, but that makes perfect sense.
But I thought of another like analogy today is like, what if it's more like you start with a spoon and you're digging out with a spoon, and then you switch to something bigger, and then you switch to a shovel, and then eventually you have a whole crew, and like you're going to get there someday, but you have to keep pivoting to that success instead of like, you can get there, but if you keep trying with that spoon, you'll never get there.
Yeah, and the thing is, yeah, never giving up, trying a lot, not being afraid to just go big on an idea. Now there's really two important things here. When I would try something new, I try to do it in a way that failure is not gonna be a huge deal, meaning that it's not gonna threaten my well-being or my family or my income or any of that, meaning it's a test, right? There's nothing dangerous about it. I'm just trying, it's an experiment. There's no risk of everything blowing up. That's one important thing. You can try something new, but don't quit your job to just do that one thing, because then it's scary and it's dangerous. And the second thing about it is, if you want to try something, try it not just one way, but many different ways. And I was talking about conferences earlier. My process to speak at conferences is to apply to a lot of them. I don't apply to 1 or 2 conferences per year. I apply to 10 conferences. And I've been doing that for 3 or 4 years. I know that I get selected about 50-60% of the time. So with that in mind, I now know that if I want to speak 4 times per year, I'm going to have to apply to 8 conferences. So at the beginning of the year, I would just select 8 of them and just apply, and then it works. So I fail at least 50% of the time, but it doesn't matter because I succeed the other 50% of the time. So that's what I learned by just, keeping trying, applying, succeeding, failing, and now I use that as a way to just know how it works and work around it, basically.
Right. So you have to track your metrics.
Yes.
And I really like what you talked about, like, and I think, I've thought of this in the past. Like, I worked for Walmart a long time ago, and I was like, I'm going to quit Walmart and start, selling stuff on eBay. And I was like, I'm so glad I didn't do it because I would have fallen flat on my face. And it's probably, you say you have some clients now who are just doing the freelancing on the side, right? To start with. That's kind of the safest way to start as well, even with freelancing, is not to quit, because if you right, I guess maybe if you're living if you can share a bedroom and you don't have a family, you can maybe just go all in. But if you have more more faces to feed, you have to be a little more cautious, right?
Exactly. Yeah, don't put everything on the line. Make your new idea, your new experiment safe, in a sense that it's okay to fail.
I love it. So let's pivot now to the productivity question. So what does being productive feel like to you?
So that's a very good question. And because I'm self-employed, my relationship to productivity is very interesting, because the more productive I am, the more things I can do, the more clients I can get, and the more money I can make, basically. So productivity is super important for me, and it's been a key thing that's been driving everything I've done for the past 10 years, probably. So I'm extremely organized in terms of productivity, and a bunch of crazy things I do, for instance, is that I don't answer the phone, ever, never. So my phone is always on do not disturb. And if people really want to talk to me, they would leave a voicemail, and I'm gonna read that or listen to it and then call back if needed. But I try to work in a way that everything I do is is async, meaning that I want to be able to focus on what I want to do for a long amount of time. And then once I'm done, I can deal with all of the distractions. So email, phone calls, notifications, whatever. But I have to be able to put everything aside to be very productive when I want to. That's really the key thing. And I've been designing everything in my life around that.
So you're single threaded and you're monotasking basically.
Exactly.
It's like,
yeah.
okay.
Oh yeah. Big time. Yeah.
Awesome. So you feel productive if you aren't getting distracted a lot and you can just focus.
Yeah, that's one of the key things to it. So, not having a commute means I'm never stuck in traffic. So there's no delays to get anywhere, or I can decide when to go to do things when there's less traffic around here. So if I have to do an errand or do an appointment or that kind of thing, I'm going to do it whenever nobody else is doing it, because I can do that. And I know that's always more productive. But yeah, that's basically a kind of flexibility that you get because you're self-employed, which not everyone can do. So that's one of the perks, I would say.
That's a good perk. So what's your favorite tool to use for productivity, via a programming tool or a planning tool or something like that?
So my main tool for productivity is my to-do list. And as a to-do list manager, I'm using Todoist, which is a very basic to-do list app. You can have it on Android, iPhone, web, and it just gets the job done. You have your to-dos and you can organize them by project, by day, which is pretty much all you need to make things happen. So that's my tool number one. It's always open in my browser. I have it open right now in front of me. It's always there. So that's the number one.
So how do you keep on track with that? Because I've bumped around to a lot of different tools, and some work better than others for me. Like how have you created a habit that you get things done on that to-do list?
So I guess the thing is, it's not the tool itself that matters the most. It's a process that you put around it. And in my case, one of the things that got me into that is years ago, I read the book Getting Things Done. So the official GTD book. And another one that was a big influence for me was the 4-Hour Work Week.
Yeah.
Tim Ferriss. So you combine these two things. And from that, I created my own productivity system, which is basically, I have, let's say, my bucket list, which is all of the things I want to do in my life. And every year I take my bucket list and everything that's in it, not everything, but I take at least a few items in it that I want to turn into goals for that given year. So for 2020, for instance, I took a bunch of things on my bucket list and I made sure that they become goals for this year. So it has to happen in 2020. And once I've done that, these goals then become tasks or a succession of tasks that have to happen in order for me to get to that goal. And that's basically my process. So you start with, the very big picture, all of the stuff I want to do. Then you get to focus that picture on the current year. And then you divide it to the current months and then to the current week. And what do I do this week to move the needle on all of these things that I want to make progress on? If you do things that way, then you're more likely to get somewhere because you basically have everything under control, and all of the tasks that make it to your to-do list, they have a purpose that you can relate to, and it contributes to the big picture. So it's easier to not procrastinate or to know the importance of it, really.
I love it because I've heard it put. It's like if you have a vision of what you want in the future,
yes.
You can relate back to that vision, and that's what motivates you.
Exactly. So if one day I feel like, oh no, I don't want to do that today, then I'm like, okay, why do I do this task? Oh yeah, it's going to contribute to this, which is going to get me there, which contributes to that. Okay, I'm going to do it.
It's a good motivator. I love it. I love it. So what's your favorite productivity technique? It sounds like you've done GTD before. Is that your favorite one, or do you have another one that's
so my process is very close from GTD. Yeah, it's really GTD with my own flavor to it, but very close to it. I like something which is kind of advocated by GTD is to the inbox zero idea. So when I get to my Gmail and open it, it has to be empty or close to empty most of the day. So every morning, one of my first tasks is to go through all of my inboxes and empty them. So make sure that everything is dealt with, either turned into a task or the email is responded to or deleted. But I have to act on every single thing and make a decision on what's going to happen next. So that's one of my big things as well. So inbox zero plus GTD. Yeah, that's much of what I do. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. I love it. How do you, because I'm interested in inbox zero because I'm horrible at this. So do you turn your tasks, like, do you start, like, I'm assuming you use Gmail, right? So
yeah. Mm-hmm.
do you star your emails and then come back to them, or do you like wipe them out and then turn them into a task so you have everything in one place? Does that make sense? Like, are you having to switch between your email and your to-do list to figure out what's going on?
So in Gmail, I have the Todoist extension, which means that if an email has to become a task, I just click that button and it creates a task in Todoist, and that task is going to have a link to the original email. So then I can archive the email and it's not in my inbox anymore, but when I go to my to-do list and work on it, I just click and I'm back into the right context.
I love it so much because GTD, from what I remember, I listened to the book a few years back. It's all about getting loops out of your head because
exactly.
you get stuck and you're like, yeah. Oh, I need to go check my email. I need to go check my email because I'm missing something, you know? It's
Yeah, the idea is I don't have anything stored in here anymore. It's all in my systems. It's all in the calendar or in my inbox. Well, not in the inbox, but in Gmail archived somewhere. It's all organized. So usually if you ask me, what are you going to do tomorrow or next week, I can't answer right away because I know where to find the answer, but I don't have it because it's not in here. That's the idea. Remove all of that stress of trying to remember about, I have to do this, I have to do that. And instead have a system that stores the info and you can get that info from your system anytime you need it.
Does this help you? Does this help relieve cognitive? Because I think it talks about in the book how it kind of helps relieve a cognitive load. Does that help you with coding and your other endeavors?
Most likely, yeah. I feel much better now than what I used to be 10 years ago when I did not do that, because there's no more kind of panic attack where, oh, I have to do this, I have to do that, I have so much to do and I have to remember about it and blah, blah, blah. Now all of that is gone. At any given time of the day, I just focus on that one thing, which is in my to-do list. When it's done, I mark it done, move on to the next. And the system takes care of everything else. So it does help to be much more focused and zen in many ways.
I feel like this is turning into an ad for Todoist. We should have got some sponsorship. But so I'm sure you can do this with a lot of different tools. But one thing that I have to force myself to do is, like, when I reached out to you, I'm like, I got to go make this on my calendar right now and put some, like, how do you manage, does Todoist help you to manage your calendar as well? Like, how do you manage those notifications? Like, how did you know that we had this going on tonight?
So that's because you created a calendar invite, and my calendar is synchronized with Todoist. So there's a plugin to connect the two. So as soon as we created that entry, it automatically created a task in my Todoist for today with the right label and everything.
So you go and scan during the day or several times a day what you have to do.
Exactly.
And then you get a reminder as well, right?
Yeah. Well, I don't really use the reminders because the list really drives everything I do, no matter what. So it's always open, and basically it's really the two things I always have somewhere on my screen are my to-do list and my Gmail. Basically, I try to check it out only once per day, get to inbox zero, but sometimes lots of stuff is going on, so I would still take a look a few times during the day.
Interesting. So it's
Yeah.
kind of like your calendar as well. You know what's going to happen during different
Yeah.
times of the day.
Yeah. And the
Cool.
thing is, because it's all centralized in one place, which is Retodoist, I don't have to go to my calendar so much, unless I have to plan for, let's say, weeks or months ahead, in which case the calendar is easier to get there. But on a daily basis, my to-do list has everything. Yeah.
I really like that. I really like putting stuff in one place. So that's definitely a good, whatever tool you use, try to use one tool if you can. So what's your most productive time of the day? Like, is it early in the morning? Is it late at night? When are you like in your zen?
It depends. I do know that after lunch, so let's say anytime between 12 p.m. and 3 p.m. is the worst for me. So after lunch doesn't work. Funny thing is, most of the time I can get very productive just before lunch or later in the afternoon. So 11 a.m. or let's say 4, 5 p.m., which is interesting because that's just the time before you're supposed to kind of check out and stop. But somehow that's when I get in the zone and I don't want to stop. So that's a problem sometimes.
That's interesting though, because I think that's another good reason why you should like become a freelancer or work for yourself is if you notice like, hey, I can't control my schedule and I seem to be most productive during this time of the day, then maybe I should, go either find a job that's way more flexible or become my own boss. So that's something that just came to me. I think that's really cool. So what's the best advice that you've received on productivity?
The best advice I've received on productivity, I would say single tasking. So just working on one thing at a time is huge. That makes so much. Yeah, it multiplies your productivity by 10 times at least. That's for sure. So trying to remove all notifications, any Slack, phones, all of these things that try to distract us all day long. Try to remove that, focus on just one single task. This is huge. That's going to help you achieve a lot more.
I love it. I love it. So thank you so much for coming on, Alain. Where's the best place we can go and follow you? So I know that your new blog is angulartraining.com, correct?
So angulartraining.com is my main place of business. Yep, that's where you can find my blog. That's where you can find a place to contact me if you need to. I'm also very active on LinkedIn. So if you want to connect on LinkedIn, feel free to do that. I'm always happy to connect. And yeah, these are the two main places to find me right now. Yeah.
Yeah, and on LinkedIn, it's linkedin.com/IN/ACHAUTARD.
Yep.
So
That's me.
awesome. Hey, Alain, thanks so much. And we look forward to seeing what you do in the future.